At the age of 31, Tony was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder.
Were you surprised? I was not surprised because I always felt different. I was just relieved, like, oh, this is why I am the way I am. And it just made my whole life, everything about my life, make so much sense. It was like a clarity, like putting some 3D glasses on.
Yeah.
40% shooting. Oh, Snell.
Here it is. Can you say every highlight show? That'll wake this crowd up. That's waking the bench up.
Welcome to the Dark Times channel. And in this particular video, I want to discuss autism as it pertains to former NBA player Tony Snell, and also how it pertains to you, or how it may pertain to somebody that you may know or you may love and care about. And recently, Tony Snell has come out and said that he was diagnosed with autism at the age of 31. And there's nothing unusual about a person getting diagnosed with ASD later on in life. A lot of people do, especially nowadays. I would say before 2000, that's not something that was really commonly tested for, or at least it wasn't something that was a household name. I would say before late 90s, 2000, that's not something that was really talked about on the scale that it's talked about. And so because of that, people didn't test for it and people didn't label it as such. It wasn't a condition. It was just people had different personalities and people had different ways of thinking and being. And there's something that Tony Snell, or something that the interview said about Tony Snell during this interview. And before I chime in on that, I'm going to go ahead and play the clip. And then, of course, afterwards, I'll come back and chime in.
In inner cities.
Are you so fascinated by how he said that if he had been diagnosed as a little kid, he may not be the man he was today? I found that fascinating. Yeah.
And he said that was due in part to the fact that because he was on the spectrum, he could go shoot a basketball for 6-7 hours straight and think nothing of it. And obviously, he got a lot better over the years as a result of that.
And so when I was listening to this interview and this news story about Tony Snell and about his late discovery in life with his autism, when I was listening to this, that really struck something. And I'm not sure a lot of people caught that. Some people may have caught it, but I don't think they really respected what was said just there. Had Tony Snell been diagnosed with autism, he doesn't think that he would have been in the NBA. And I couldn't agree more. Had Tony Snell, who grew up in Compton, California, been diagnosed back in the 90s with autism, he would have been sent to a special class, been in a special program, and nobody would know who he was. And I'm not saying that's a good or a bad thing. His life could have went in a number of directions. Who knows? But one thing that Tony is sure of, and one thing that I'm sure of, is that most likely he wouldn't have been in the NBA. He wouldn't have been able to achieve to the same level that he did. Had somebody told him that he was different, had somebody told him that he was quote unquote special, he wouldn't have been able to achieve to the level that he was able to achieve in the NBA, or even get to the NBA, let alone college. Because they would have put him in a special class with a special teacher, maybe even put him on a special bus. His whole environment would have been different. The way people interacted with him would have been different. I would say one of the worst things that you can do is put a label on your child. In fact, one of the worst things that you can do is put a label on anybody, including yourself. That's one of the worst things you can do, especially if it has any kind of negative connotation with it. If there's any kind of negative connotation assigned to that word or that label or that diagnosis that you decide to give yourself, or that somebody else decides to give you or your child or somebody that you know, that's one of the most counterproductive things that you can do. Somebody told me this a long time ago. Never let anybody designate a label to you. Never let anybody label you anything. You label yourself. Whatever it is that you want to be, whatever it is that you want to accomplish, that's who you are and that's who you be. Excuse my English, but it fit. And so the label is whatever the hell that you want it to be, or whatever the hell that you want that label to be for the person that you love. That's the label. That's the designation. And so that's how this former NBA player was able to play 9 consecutive seasons in the NBA. Not one, not two, but 9 consecutive seasons in the NBA. Made close to $60 million. But had somebody told him that he was autistic, especially growing up in the 90s and especially growing up in South Central LA or Compton, California, like I said, he would have been put in a program and he would have been left behind, most likely. I did a video last year about the movie Gattaca. That was probably one of my favorite videos. That was probably one of my favorite videos that I've done so far. That's a movie that always stood out to me. It was a movie about overcoming. It was a movie about not only overcoming the conditions that you're born with, but it was also about overcoming your family and people around you. And if any of you all haven't seen that movie, definitely check out that movie. It's called Gattaca. It came out in 1998, starring Ethan Hawke. And I'm going to try not to spoil the movie too much, but I want to talk about that movie just a little bit. So in that particular movie, the movie Gattaca, it was a science fiction movie based in the not so distant future.
I'll never understand what possessed my mother to put her faith in God's hands rather than those of her local geneticist. 10 fingers, 10 toes, that's all that used to matter. Not now.
So the main character, who's played by Ethan Hawke, his parents decided not to do gene therapy for their first child. And they had him, quote unquote, the natural way. He was called a godchild. Basically, you roll the dice, the old-fashioned way. No gene therapy. Whatever you have, it is what it is. And so that's what his parents decided to do.
Attention deficit disorder, 89% probability. Neurological condition, 60% probability. Manic depression, 42% probability. Heart disorder, 99% probability. Life expectancy, 30.2 years.
30 years.
Everything that's going to be going on with your child, they have the ability to tell the parents right then and there. The main character in that movie, Ethan Hawke, was diagnosed with ADHD at birth, and I believe his character would have also been considered autistic as well. He winds up becoming the #1 astronaut at Gattaca, which is a space station. He winds up becoming the #1 astronaut.
He's one of our best. I'm certain he has nothing to do with this business.
And like I said, if you watch that movie, you probably have to go back and watch it again. You might have to go back and watch it 2 or 3 times. Because if you watch that movie and you really break it down, the only way that Ethan Hawke's character was able to become an astronaut is because he took on the identity of somebody else.
Eugene, they are going to find me.
You still don't understand, do you? When they look at you, they don't see you anymore, they only see me.
He changed his name, he changed his look, he changed his total identification. Everything about him, every day, every time he woke up, was trying to pretend to be somebody else, but at the same time, use his own intellect and understanding to be able to be the #1 astronaut within Gattaca. And so when I saw that interview with Tony Snell, it reminded me of the movie Gattaca. It reminded me of the movie Gattaca because it reminded me of the limitations that we continuously put on our children. And not just children, people in general. We continuously limit people and put them in a box, all because of a label that was assigned to them. And so what we're really talking about are labels and designations and how they handicap individuals, how they keep you from what you were meant to do. Now, I'm not saying that an individual should ignore being diagnosed with being on the spectrum, or they should ignore an individual that has been diagnosed with being on the spectrum. Quite the opposite. Quite the opposite. I think people should embrace it, especially parents. You know, if you suspect your child of being autistic or being on the spectrum, or you've already had them tested for being on the spectrum, you should embrace it. But the last thing you should do, in my opinion, now this is my opinion, it's not a medical opinion, I'm not a doctor, but in my opinion, I would never tell that child, at least not at first, I would never tell that child. What's the point? And I would also try alchemy, definitely not speaking from a medical point of view. In my opinion, I would try a heavy metal detox as well. And I'm not going to go too deep on that, but that's something that you should absolutely check out, is detoxing from heavy metals. And that's all I'm going to say about that. I'll let you guys do the research on that one. And as I was doing this video, I came across a list of people that are said to have autism or some form of autism or be on the spectrum. And it's an unbelievable list. It's not just an incredible list, it's an unbelievable list. Dan Aykroyd, longtime actor, film writer. Albert Einstein needs no introduction. Anthony Hopkins, actor. Tim Burton, famous movie director. Charles Darwin, Bobby Fischer, a chess grandmaster. Bill Gates, co-founder of Microsoft, needs no introduction. Sir Isaac Newton, Jerry Seinfeld, Nikola Tesla, Elon Musk, Leonardo da Vinci, Steven Spielberg, Alfred Hitchcock, Thomas Edison, Alexander Graham Bell, Benjamin Franklin, Henry Ford, Ludwig van Beethoven, Wolfgang Mozart, Bob Dylan, George Orwell. And so a common theme that I noticed with all of these famous individuals that are said to have autism or said to have had autism, one of the main things that they all have in common, besides some of their autistic traits, is that they're all inventors of some sort, whether it be music, whether it be writing, whether it be scientific theories. These are all individuals that have off the charts creativity. I'm not talking about a level of just being able to create something, but these are individuals that have pure genius behind their creativity. And I would say 99.9% of the people that I just listed were never labeled autistic during their lifetime and never sat in a special class and never had a special teacher, never had a special bus, and were never coddled like a lot of individuals that are diagnosed with autism are coddled. And I would say that the stigma behind autism is changing somewhat. It seems like people are a lot more knowledgeable about it. I wouldn't say the average person is a lot more knowledgeable about it, but people are definitely becoming a lot more aware than they used to be. And I would say some of the limitations that people have around autism is definitely going away, but it's something that I wouldn't identify with. I wouldn't want to identify with, not just yet, not until they put the proper label on it. And I understand that there's different levels of being autistic or being on the spectrum, but for high functioning and functioning people that are diagnosed with autism, I definitely wouldn't allow another individual to put a label on me. Because even on a conscious level, if a person is diagnosed with something on a conscious level, what's going to happen is they're going to identify with all of the traits that belongs to said group or said diagnosis, the good and the bad. And I would say that there's still way too much negativity surrounding autism or ASD. And on a subconscious level, a person like that can forget it. Because on the subconscious level, they're going to pick up on the coddling. They're going to pick up on the special class. They're going to pick up on the special teacher and however else they're set to be made different and set apart. And that's on the subconscious level, which we know is way more powerful than on the conscious level. And so if it were me and I had a child that was autistic, there's no way in hell I would tell him or her that. The best thing that you can do if you have a child that's autistic is teach them and communicate with them the way that they want to. Don't try to make that child into something that that child was never meant to be. That child was never meant to be like everybody else. That child was never meant to be like the rest of the kids. At least not in the way that you think they should be. And so, of course, I'm not saying that every child or every adult that's been diagnosed with autism is going to have some special skill that society is going to recognize. But I'll say this, they have a better chance than most. They have a better chance than most. They're in good company, very good company. One of the things that always stood out to me is how God always used the weak throughout the Bible, or who was said to be weak, the weak things. All the stories throughout the Bible, but I won't say all the stories, but a good majority of the stories throughout the Bible were always about overcoming. And there's a scripture in Corinthians. It said that God chose what is foolish in the world to shame the wise, and God chose what is weak in the world to shame the strong. It's always the ones that people think less of are usually the ones that come out. And I won't say on top, but they do incredible. They do incredible things. They do incredible work in this world, and they do incredible things that people didn't think was even possible. And I believe it was even more possible for that to happen centuries ago and eons ago, because they didn't have a label. They let that person work. Going back to Imhotep, the first multi-genius person that this world has ever known, the father of medicine, the father of architect, father of mathematics, the first open heart surgery. The list goes on and on and on. And an individual like that most definitely would have been labeled autistic. Somebody with that amount of time and dedication and focus, you better believe they would have been labeled something. And so we have to start looking at things differently. We got to start looking at the world differently and shake these labels and confinements, especially if it has a negative connotation to it, any negative connotation to it. The most powerful phrase a person can say is, I am. Let the weak say, I am strong. That's the most powerful thing an individual has at any given time, at any given moment, is I am. Whatever follows I am, that's what you become. And a lot of individuals who come up with these labels and designations know this. And so they get the children while they're young. They get into your minds while you're young. And they cause you to put labels on yourself. You introduce yourself as such and such, and then you say, by the way, I am this. I am that. And so I think that's going to be a good spot to go ahead and close out the video. And I definitely want to get some feedback on this one. So please be sure you like the video, and then also please be sure to comment in the comment section below. And I'll go ahead and try to chime in as usual. Peace and chaos.